Ever since childhood, I've always been fascinated by endurance sports.
What would your training look like? What would your exercises look like?
I used to regularly go training, be it in the snow, be it biking all across college. I think that's the mentality amongst most Ironman triathletes.
How did you not go crazy? I feel like I would have gone dizzy and collapsed on the spot.
Because I really enjoyed doing it. During the race, I had a lot of dates, a lot of Nutella, peanut butter.
If I was ever to compete in a triathlon, it would only be for the paneer makhni, dal makhni, and Nutella that you mentioned.
I got excited when he said ice cream and cake.
On one side is the mountain, the other side is the valley.
That just sounds crazy on a very different level.
I kept on feeling that I have something more in me and I can go a lot faster.
It just sounds amazing. It fills us with pride to know that you were the only Indian running.
I was bleeding on my knees and elbow, but I had like band-aids put in place. And even for the last about 500 meters is when my coach gave me the Indian flag. And having that on me also gave in the extra pump of motivation. And that took me through the finish.
Hey everyone, we're back with an all new episode of All About Sports, the podcast. Now, last week we covered Indian badminton with one of India's top talents, Shlok Ramchandran. And this time we have a very, very interesting triathlete with us, Anuj Goradia. Now, it's a pleasure to introduce Anuj to you. Firstly, I am Mazhar Gadiwala. I have my co-hosts Rishabh Krishnan, Shubham Maloo, and Aniket as well. Now, just to introduce Anuj to you in a bit more detail and what he's achieved. So, Anuj was actually the first ever Indian to complete the Ironman 70.3. I'm going to let Anuj describe that a bit later in detail. Now, apart from being India's first ever Ironman, he managed to complete it in 7 hours, 32 minutes, and 17 seconds. Now, to put that into perspective, I'll just tell you what all he covered in that much time.
1.9 kilometers of swimming,
90.1 kilometers of cycling, and 20.1 kilometers of running. And this is in Norway. You can imagine the conditions for an Indian athlete. We are not used to that weather. Anuj did all of this at the age of 20 back in 2014. And he finished 75th in the male category for the between the ages of 18 to 24. For all those who actually follow and understand how this works, he finished swimming in 42 minutes and 51 seconds, cycling in 3 hours 39 minutes, and running in 2.5 hours, slightly over that. So Anuj, firstly, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm sure many people will be very interested to know your entire story. So firstly, how was your experience of being a part of the Ironman, and what was it like to do it at the age of 19, 20 that you were?
Hi Mazhar, hi Rishabh, hi Shubham and Aniket. Thanks a lot for actually having me here and thanks for the introduction. It really sounded like a lot, but I would say that it's not that I'm challenging also as I take you through it also. So, I would say that ever since childhood, I've always been fascinated by endurance sports. And before, like during my early days, I was a very, I would say, hardcore swimmer. And I think that's where it like built up most of my stamina, although I didn't realize it being built because I was so young at that time. And then during like school sports days, we had like the standard 800-meter and 1500-meter open event. And that time, me being in the seventh or eighth, we used to compete with guys in the 10th and 12th. And I used to always have a position somewhere in those races. So I knew that um that something is there through which I like maybe enjoy the pain or like enjoy going long basically. And although during school I used to enjoy playing football, like we've been couple of the Marines that you all know, like there's Rahil or Shane Patel who had been in the BD football team with me. And there also I think my strength was just running up and down the field constantly. And I always knew that like I like doing running, cycling, swimming, but I wouldn't cycle on the roads very often because of safety reasons, or I would kind of have a car behind me. So then finally, when I got a chance to like go for my studies abroad, that's when you see that actually due to maybe insurance reasons also, cyclists are respected there and people take extreme caution. So then I got into it. Then I like got into it on a very aggressive basis. And one of my father's friends, so he completed like a full Ironman in Cozumel, Mexico, and he finished it at age 52. And he actually, I've seen some footage of him, and it was a different start in Cozumel where you have to basically jump from like a cliff into the water and then start your swim. So just seeing how his footage is, hearing about his experiences, and I got in touch with his coach. So we'll like share the same coach from he stays in Khar Bandra, and he's actually he's a medical surgeon by profession, but he just was a power lifter back in the day, and now he's taken up triathlon. So he trains athletes, and like his form of recovery is not through medicine or surgery. Surgery, yes, to an extent, but he believes that the best form of recovery is through exercising your body correctly. So that's when I began to regularly go to his house come training center, and I like decided that I also would like to do an Ironman. But instead of doing a full Ironman, I thought I'll probably start slow, do like a Ironman 70.3, or there's a different race called a 5150, where you only cycle and bike. But I thought that then there's no point because of my I would say my core strength is swimming, so I should take part in the discipline as well. So I just went for the long shot and thought, let's try the half Ironman and see how it goes. So with him, with support from like friends, family, to my various diet regimens, my I would say workout routines or sleep cycles, they all kind of supported me well. And then finally things like went well and good. And I think that time also I had a good amount of time on my hands because I was still a student. And although I was doing my civil engineering at Penn State, it turned out that the first 2 years were not that tough in college because of IB math and then like IB chemistry. So things were a bit. I had some time on my hands, and I thought that let me actually put my time to use. And I used to regularly go training, be it in the snow, be it biking all across college, and even I had like a standard bike to go from class to class, and that I would use also for my workouts, and then got a better bike eventually. So I think the main reason was that I had time on my hands. Is that's why I could put in like 8 to 10 months of dedicated training and then go for the race.
So, Anuj, firstly, all of this sounds extremely very fascinating. You mentioned diet and workout and how you train and so on and so forth. So when you were preparing for like these competitions, how many days before the competition would you make tweaks to your diet, or what would your training look like? What would your exercises look like? And like you mentioned, recovery also. Like obviously, you're doing high endurance sports. So in terms of recovery, also, what would your entire pattern or a day look like generally?
Um, yeah. So just to kind of go in a, I would say, step by step manner, like from a diet point of view. I wasn't very, I would say, decisive that maybe I'm 3 weeks away from a competition. Let me modify my diet. I would try and maintain a decently healthy diet, and maybe when I get more near to competition, intake more carbs and more protein. And during non-competition time or during normal time, it was a decently good diet. But I think when I was during nearing competition, my coach recommended me, I would say a couple of, there was a regular protein shake, amino acids. And he had this, I would say, very Indian born amino acid made somewhere in South India, where he himself knew the recipes of what used to go into the protein powder. So although he did recommend me to go for the regular isopure and whey protein, But this was like, I would say he knew the founder of the company, and he could tweak the protein shakes to his athletes. So that was something I would start taking when I'm 3 4 months away from competition. And diet point of view, so I'm a vegetarian, but I eat eggs. So it was a lot of eggs, lot of pasta, a lot of rice, just to kind of get going. And there were times, even like on a lighter note or so, during tough runs or tough bike workouts. After the workout, my coach would actually get me ice cream and cake, because that's how much I used to kind of burn. So he said, you just eat what you want, but kind of recover what all you lost, because you don't want to lose weight and lose muscle. You have to maintain that. Apart from diet, my routine was fairly simple in the way that daily morning I used to have like a morning session in his house from 6 to 9, 6 to 10 or so. And this was in the summer break. So I had time in my hands. I used to come home, get refreshed, then take a evening nap, sorry, afternoon nap from around 1 to 3 or so, because I had the time. I would say right now doing this with work is challenging, but at least when I had the time, he used to, I mean, even my belief was try and take as much rest as I can, because I would try to do a workout every day compared to every alternate day. So I had to ensure I recover well in the day and in the night sleep as well. So it was a 1 or 2 hour nap after lunch, and then a 8 to 9 hour good routine at night as well. And during college, I wasn't always able to maintain that with either assignments or homeworks or just social gatherings also. But then I think that time, I mean, all of us were younger back then, and our bodies could take that load of maybe less sleep, less water, or like get through it. And I also had like a club in college, like it was the Penn State Club XC, so the cross country club, and the Penn State Triathlon Club. So I would see that I am being very picky about my diet, and say I am at like a maybe a level of 5 on 10, but the local athletes there would not bother about their diets at all and still be a 9 on 10 or so. So it would be like then it was more of just instinctive aggression compared to maintaining a very routine diet. Because there was one time, and I think for 4 years or so, even after my Ironman, I actually had a weighing scale with me in college, like a mini weighing scale, where I used to end up measuring the food, or like weighing the food I would take. So if I'm having like roti or so, like made in India, we used to kind of measure the weight in grams of the roti load also, to ensure that I'm taking the right amount of carbs, protein, and fats throughout my training.
No,
So
Anuj, I was gonna say, barring the eating of cake and ice cream, I'm not sure any of us can, relate to what it takes to do something, like the Iron Man, because we're all very far away from it. Obviously, none of us, other than you, have done it. I want to ask, kind of to vicariously live through you, if you can talk a little bit about your experience on the day. I think one, what your decision was, reason for choosing Norway, why you chose to do it in Norway, and secondly, any of your memories from the day itself, things that you maybe found challenging, things that maybe came in the way as you were going through it. I know you said swimming is maybe your strong suit. Which of the three would you say is maybe the one that you struggled with the most on the day or in general, just to give a picture of the event itself, on that day?
yeah, so I would say that see the reason for choosing Norway was that it's a summer race. And I thought that being my first race, let me take a race where the race gradient, so the slope and the uphills and downhills in the bike, I didn't want them to be extremely challenging for me. So I thought Norway has a fairly flat course, but turned out I was wrong actually. I think seeing the elevation profile on the website kind of it, like I would say, tricked me also. And till I got to the race, I then realized that it's not actually that I would say that, like it I would say that the average gradient definitely was very real, maybe a 0 or like 1% or so, but there were a lot of uppers and downhills, so it kind of made up for it. And I would say that the like a few memories from the race was that I was very excited, and we had actually gone to Norway about 10 days prior to the race to get acclimatized to the climate there, going from a tropical region to a cold region. And mainly because my coach and me had the time to spend. So normally we would go 3 days prior or so. But here being the summer break, we went 10 days earlier. And even it was challenging to actually find the right food in Norway. And we even requested the hotel out there to allow us to use the kitchen and make food, because to them they had other triathletes staying out there as well, but their diets and their kind of food wasn't at all similar to what an Indian used to eat there. And we were lucky to actually find an Indian restaurant. So there was a place called India Gate in the town of Haugesund in Norway. And there were a couple of Punjabi guys who had settled there in Norway, and they understood what I needed. And at that time, I just needed very, very simple food like this maybe a dal makhani with no cream, no spices, and rice. And then maybe a simple ali ole pasta, or like even a I would say just a boiled pasta with less sauce and no spices at all to avoid acidity. And that was so during the race as well. On my bike, I had like at least 12 to 15 of those energy gels pasted onto the bike. And during the race, I used to just grab them, chew them, and then get going. Because I wasn't sure about even taking food on the go. There were a couple of, I would say, local Norwegians who were offering food, but I didn't know what the food was. There were crackers and cheese, but that also did not feel like the right choice to eat during a race also. Maybe the Europeans are okay with that, but I don't think that would help me. So to the extent I tried eating whatever I could, and I used also during the race I had a lot of dates, a lot of Nutella, peanut butter that I'd kept for myself during the two transitions from swim to bike and bike to run, which helped me out the most. Is I actually even during the race took like a different drink. So they had like a, I would say, a protein shake being offered, but I think that like did not suit my body extremely well. So after like having a sip or two, I immediately realized that it's not right. So I immediately kind of let go of it. And I think that call kind of changed the race completely for me, because even those one or two sips of that drink is why I could not go as fast as I could during the run. So normally I've done a few half marathons where I finished the race in roughly 1 hour 45 to 150 or so. And then you hear definitely I can target a 210 or a 2. But then I didn't have a good stomach in the race. So that's why I ended up finishing in about 2.5 hours or so. But I think overall, so even though my strength is the swimming aspect, I did not push in the swim extremely hard, because during the swim, if I were to push extra, put in the extra effort, I would gain a few spots compared to my competitors. But if I put that same effort in the bike, I can go a lot farther compared to them. So I think that's the mentality amongst most Ironman triathletes, that the swim is just a formality. You just need to stay with the pack and ensure that you're swimming in a straight line. Because although the swim is just 1.9 kilometers, I swam 2.2 kilometers. And even during my training, from 1.9, I swam 2.8 kilometers. So I did improve in the actual race. But when you wear the wetsuit, which is compulsory in a place like Norway, you tend to float a lot. And when you float, and it's not a swimming pool where you have like a black color lane inside the pool to know where you're going. So I had to kind of my my main idea in the swim was to ensure that I'm going on track and maintaining a decent pace. So immediately after the swim, I spent about 20 minutes or so in transition. I would have liked to spend about 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so, but then taking off the wetsuit, although I had my cycling gear inside the wetsuit only, but then taking out the wetsuit, recovering, having some having some carbs after that, and especially in Norway, So to avoid the cold, there was a special kind of gel that I had taken for myself being from India. I think the locals did not need that. It was a different kind of gel to basically not let the cold get into your body completely. It's just a protective layer. So that's why I spent 20 minutes in transition one and got going onto the bike. So during the bike leg as well from 92 kilometers, the first 35 to 45 kilometers were like on the highway itself. There, I kept on feeling that I have something more in me and I can go a lot faster. But I thought, let me kind of go a bit slow and not like expend all my energy in the first leg because I don't know what to expect after this. So I maintained a, I would say not a slow pace or so, but a average pace. And even the bikes were extremely light bikes, being carbon fiber bikes. And I've heard like from my coach only that my colleague's bike in Mexico, he was actually kind of moving with the wind because of how light the bikes were. And even here, when I was cycling on the highway, on one side is on one side is the mountain, the other side is the valley. So I also was a bit scared or a bit nervous about going too fast on that day. So for the first 35 km, I did not push too much, and I think I also fell back in the pack. But I think that wasn't my goal. I mean, my goal was just to finish with a decent time also. And after that came a few hills, and the hills also were manageable. They weren't too challenging. And then we kind of went through a very beautiful stretch of a couple of cycling right nearby at least thousands of farms, and that was when there were farmers, their families, their kids on both sides of the road, because in Norway they have like a traditional bell, and they all were shouting and cheering in their local language. So that was when I thought, let me pick up the pace a bit. And then for the balance 30-35 kilometers is when I did like go a lot faster compared to my earlier pace. And then for the last again 30-35 kilometers or so, we were back on the highway. So I again was a bit careful because actually during the highway, so unlike a race in India, or I would say like the Tata Marathon, when they block cars completely, here on the highway they didn't block cars for us, and they blocked only for a few hours or so. That was why I wasn't too sure. Although I mean there they do respect cyclists and it's very common there, but you never know, if there's a crash, there's a crash. So when there weren't any cars around me in the fields, I went as fast as I could. And then coming back onto the highway, I again got down to like a fairly reasonable pace. And during I think the 75th kilometer is somewhat when I was like doing really bad. The thing was there, 90 kilometers was one loop, so I didn't have to do one loop 5 times or so. So my parents and my coach had all come, and I was hoping to spot them in the race. At least they've come all the way here, so even to for me to see them will bring in that extra motivation, that extra push to go faster. So at the 75th km is actually when I saw my parents, and they also were a bit shocked or surprised to see that I've managed to come so far. And then maybe just I would say seeing them smile or just seeing them cheer gave me that last kick to get through the last 15 kilometers. And so I used to I've been wearing cycling cleats, and they are those shoes that basically get stuck into the pedal, so you get more power. And I wasn't used to them. I did train with them in India, but I trained with them on an empty road. Whereas here, I think being the race and the race nervousness, when I was alighting off the bike, I had to come to like a steady stop, and I didn't I would say remove my cleats on time, and my bike came to a pause, and then I ended up falling. This was, I would say, in the last 100 meters or so, when everything was taken care of, just entering into transition two. But fall is a fall, and I didn't realize at that moment also how like bad the fall is also. I just thought there's no time to think about this. Let's just go forward, go for the next transition, and get on the run. Turned out that actually I spent about 25 minutes in transition to applying soframycin, band-aid, cream, and so on my wounds. And when I came out of transition to onto the run, I actually realized I was last in the race. So in the Ironmans, you have like a race marshal or like a biker who's given the job of kind of maintaining the 8.5 hour limit. Because if you finish after 8.5 hours, you technically finish, but you aren't given a medal certificate and so on and so forth. So he was right besides me, and he told me that, see, you're like almost very close to getting disqualified also. So I will go light on you, easy on you also, but I do need to maintain my discipline as well. So I tried my best, and I knew that I was bleeding on my knees and elbow, but I had like band-aids put in place. So with his support, or I actually could use the bike as like a motivation that someone's behind me pushing me to go faster. Then in the run, it was lucky that it was a 4 km run done 5 times. So actually, I saw my coach, saw the Punjabi guys who had like helped me with my diet the entire last week, and seeing them every 4 km kind of got me going also. And even interestingly, I had made a few Norwegian friends at the moment, and I didn't realize that the friends I had made actually they did not win that race, but there's a different race called the Norseman Triathlon. That's a more aggressive, challenging race where actually you jump off a ship and you swim to the shore. Then you even cycle on extreme hard terrains and you climb a mountain. And the 42 km run is an uphill run, and at the peak is the finish. So it turned out he was the champion of Norsemen for the last 3 years or so. And even seeing him, his wife, his parents, and their kids on the run, because they recognized who I was, and that also gave me the extra kick in the run. And for the first about 10 km, I was going extremely easy, did not push too much. For the last 12 km, I thought I knew that I have trained for like I have the stamina to go for 10 hours or maybe 10 plus hours also, but I hadn't particularly trained on the speed aspect. So I thought that's fine, that's not an issue. My goal is to finish here on time. I don't want to finish too late also, but I'll just keep my head down and get going. And also one other mental or psychological aspect is that in Bombay or like in my training runs, even in marathons, I always hear music in run to get going with motivational songs. But in the Ironman, they are strict that you can't have any support. So no human support, no even iPod support. So and being the race in Norway where in certain aspects there was nobody around you at all. And when you go back into downtown, there's a big crowd. So after leaving and before coming again into downtown was a huge challenge when there was no music anywhere and nothing to kind of cheer me on and like get going. So I actually began kind of, I would say, mumbling songs or humming tunes to myself also to kind of take the race forward. And it even turned out that at the water stations, they knew that I was the only Indian participant in the race. So they began to play a few Hindi songs, and they even played Jai Ho during the race. So that also gave me that like extra push, extra kick or so to like get going. And in the last 4 5 kilometers is actually when I kind of went from last in the race to about finishing in the, I would say, last 20. So I think I finished out of roughly 2000 participants, I finished at about 1980 or so, which I would say is not great for a Norwegian, but good for an Indian. So the local Norwegians there, my age, could finish in 5.5 hours or so, but they kind of live that life. So for them, it's a different story. And the last 4 5 km were like the most surreal kms of the race. And even for the last about 500 meters is when my coach gave me the Indian flag. and having that on me also given the extra pump of motivation, and that took me through the finish. And upon finishing also, I realized that I have a lot more in me that I did not put in the race. So I think that's the biggest learning for me, that maybe should not go too easy in a race, or should not go on like a very conservative note. Because I think there are stories of athletes who like collapse at the finish line. But I think my finish was such that I was good to continue the entire day and did not take a nap. That's like my entire race experience.
I mean,
Massive
you,
respect, man. It sounds
yeah,
amazing.
that just sounds crazy on a very different level. You've highlighted how much of a mental challenge also it is, right? And you have to take these small events during the race as motivation to go on. But just a small question: is there, because there is a mental aspect to every endurance sport, right? You have to be mentally charged for a much longer period than another sport. So I just wanted to know if you did train specifically on that aspect, for maintaining your focus throughout 6, 7, 8 hours apart from your physical training.
So I didn't do anything special to work on the mental aspect, but what helped the most was in India, I did a lot of indoor cycling on the cycling trainer. And today's times, there are modern trainers where you can imagine yourself cycling in a city, like you cycle in New York, you cycle in Australia, and there's a screen in front of you showing who you're competing against. But my coach, I think, had a like on purpose had taken a very simple trainer that would just imitate the gradient, and there was nothing to imagine around you. You were facing a kind of painted wall or so. That's about it. That was a, I would say, mentally draining aspect, because you're just putting in too much power on the bike, but don't know where you're going, what you're doing. And at times he would even take away all my senses. So something to keep you going in the race is seeing your power, seeing your speed, tracking your pedal movement, ensuring you're like maintaining that same power you need to be at. But to help me train mentally, he would remove it, and then it's just me with like a blank wall in front cycling, not knowing my speed, not knowing. I mean, nowadays we even know your location, your place if you compete with friends, but I had none of that. So doing that and training on the trainer really helped me, because in Norway I had a scenic view to see always. So I don't think that I think maybe that mental aspect came more in the run actually, when my legs were like extremely tired, and I had to kind of I would say mumble songs to myself to keep going. But in the bike things were very much under control.
So Anuj, obviously everything that you mentioned about your race, it just sounds amazing. It fills us with pride to know that you were the only Indian running, and with the Indian flag, the last 500 meters, I'm sure it must have given you also all the feels. One thing I'd like to ask you is, you're a vegetarian. So, like a lot of people say, as a vegetarian, building muscle or doing any sort of sport can get difficult. For you, was there like per se any sort of problems you had being a vegetarian in terms of recovery, or like some of the other people you know, or your friends or whoever was participating in the race as a non-vegetarian? Would there be too much of a difference, or you think being a vegetarian and competing is absolutely like all right, and you can compete at those high levels?
I think, see, definitely, I have like during college tried a bit of non-veg food, and I have seen the kind of recovery it gives you. But then I could not really continue, so I then just continued with eggs only. Definitely, in like a veg diet, it is a slightly harder also to recover to the optimal level versus a normal vegetarian person. But it's, with that said, it's not impossible. I mean, if you put in the extra mile, the extra effort, and you plan your diet in the right way with a veg diet with a lot of be it paneer, tofu, soya beans, or in general just other kinds of dals. So like, just to summarize, I would say that if I were on a non-veg diet, I wouldn't have gotten a better performance. It would have been the same for me. But there is like a particular aspect, like, so ever since like childhood, I've been taking the fish oil tablets. You all must be familiar with the sea cod tablets.
Yep,
And
for sure. Yep, yep.
I've seen just taking them, because I'm not I would say I would I like do eat I haven't eaten had fish also, but having the fish oil to me is okay also. And that has helped me tremendously in my recovery. On days when I have like a very heavy morning routine, just having the two tablets of those before during lunch does prepare me well for the next day compared to not having them. So I can imagine, to someone who has unlimited amounts of those, you will recover a lot faster.
And to summarize my feelings for food, if I was ever to compete in a triathlon, it would only be for the paneer makhni, dal makhni, and Nutella that you mentioned.
Yeah, I
And the
mean,
ice cream and cake, man. I got excited when he said ice cream and cake. That's the only reason I like going to the dentist as well. Ice
I,
cream.
I was gonna say, Goody, from transition like vegetarian to like fish oil tablets is quite a transition, because those fish oil tablets are quite strong smelling, aren't they? Like, I mean, I have them too, but they're pretty intense smelling.
they are, but I did not start them for the triathlon. I would
Ha,
take them earlier as a kid as well. So then I stopped, and then I again began in the triathlon. So it wasn't something new for me also.
gotcha. So you're kind of used to that, I think.
Yes,
Gotcha,
exactly.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So Anuj, I got to know that when you were training for running 21K, you ran 21K, like the equivalent of those many kilometers, just in your building garden. How many rounds was that, and how did you not go crazy? I feel like I would have gone dizzy and collapsed on the spot. How did you manage to do that?
And did your building people ever say, "Who's this person? Has he gone mad?"
No, sir. I would I would say that that was also one like other aspect of mental training and kind of mental fitness. That when you don't have something beautiful to look at, or you want running, seeing a sunset, or like seeing the waters. So although my building garden is, I would say not like too small or so, it's about a 250-meter track, and it's a fairly sandy track also. So it came to about 106 rounds. But I think keeping I feel like what really helps in like these rounds is keeping a target also. So I have a habit of kind of placing these various either a Gatorade, or like a small chocolate, or a date, or like maybe a candy, something like that. During I like pre-plan the entire event, and I ensure that at round 20 at this location, I'll like get get this sweet out and keep it going. And at round 30 I'll get something else, round 40 something else also. So if I were to look at that, I have to do 106 rounds in one go. I also would like feel like it's like complete madness also. But then having those, I would say, small incentives on the way is what kind of got me through. During my Ironman time or training, I did not do so much training in the garden also, because that time I had like the freedom going on the roads. But during the pandemic and last April, May, June is when I actually did like a half marathon in the building garden in about 2 hours or so. And that's when it like really hit me that like how mentally draining it is.
Yeah, just listening to it got us mentally drained. You doing it physically, I can't even imagine.
So what I wanted to ask you, Anuj, is like obviously all this training, it sounds intense. And to do this day in, day out, it takes a lot of motivation. Like for any person to just join the gym and be regular to the gym, it takes a lot of motivation. To do something like this, I can just imagine the level of motivation you need. So was there anything specifically that motivated you or that kept you going? And like specifically the days when you perhaps weren't feeling like it, how did you break through those barriers and what like kept you on track and kept you motivated?
I think that the most important part is like there are a lot of, I would say, gym New Year resolutions made also, but I think what like got me most. I mean, I think I didn't need that motivation a lot of times, because I really enjoyed doing it. and I'd been swimming as a child for at least 10 plus years or so, and then running also regularly. Cycling also not that regularly, but I loved cycling. So I think to me, I never like had a, I would say, feeling also before a workout that I'm not feeling like it today also. And let me take it easy. Let me not like go also. And I think one very important aspect that even counted to this is having a coach who would not tell me what I'm going to train that particular day. When I make a timetable or like maybe a gym workout routine, you kind of have 3 months planned of what you plan to do. So when you know what's coming up, it's not too exciting. But when you don't know what's lined up today, am I going to cycle, swim, run? Am I going to do it indoors, outdoors? That was also like a very important part that I feel a coach played with me. Because right now, after the Ironman, I haven't been training. I haven't been, I would say, going to the coach's house anymore for training. I do it myself. And sometimes I make like calendars of a 6 week training program. But not always do I, due to a lack of motivation, I'm not able to actually maintain that at times. So I think during the Ironman, not knowing what to expect was like the biggest motivation factor.
I was going to say, so Godi, obviously this is phenomenal. The Norway Ironman. What are your plans for? What is your next target? Is there something that you're working towards now? Any next events that you're looking for that you want to do, or at some point in life, maybe not in the recent future, but anything that your big aim for as your next big event that you'd want to tackle?
See, I definitely want to do a couple of more half Ironmans or so, and I want to target finishing in 5.5 hours. So that's my, I would say, biggest target. And then once that is through, would like to migrate to a full Ironman as well. And then beyond the full Ironmans, there are other more intensive races. Like there is a race in the Sahara Desert in Tanzania. I forget the name, but it's about a 4 day race in the desert where you have to run in the desert. And there are also these Ultraman events which consist of 2 day swim, 3 day bike, and 2 day run also. But I don't think I've heard a lot of podcasts of such athletes also. But I think at the moment my like main focus is to do a one more half Ironman sometime this summer break also. Maybe in June, July, August. I'm actually trying to search a race that I can go for. And even during the pandemic, my goal was as soon as things open up, I like to go for the first Ironman that comes up, because I knew during the pandemic a lot of people didn't have a chance to train, but I had a good time and good energy in my hands to put in the effort. So I was hoping to do the Ironman in Dubai on 31st March 21, but then I don't think I'm so prepared to do it. So maybe I will definitely do a race either somewhere in Asia or in Europe sometime in July, August also.
First of all, let's just address the fact that people who compete in Ironman events are just built different. My thought process is okay, when I travel, I'll go to this city for 2 days, then this city for 3 days, another 2 days, and back home. And this is the first time it just didn't register to me that someone would want to cycle for 2 days. But that's why they say that people who are competing in endurance events are just built different and wired different. So I have one question for you, Anuj. There is another super popular endurance quote unquote sport. It's CrossFit. Do you think people who train CrossFit could easily migrate to an Ironman? And could people who do the Ironman migrate to a CrossFit? So since CrossFit does involve so much of weight training, the Ironman to CrossFit is kind of questionable. But do you think the other way is likely, considering CrossFit is also really heavy on the endurance aspect?
I would
See, you
say
can
that
just say CrossFit is shit and no. That's a perfectly reasonable answer. Okay.
no, because I have a couple of relatives who like do a lot of CrossFit. I've also heard that at times CrossFit is a bit dangerous for your muscles, and if you go too extreme, you tend to have a injury for a maybe not lifetime, but sizable amount of time, maybe a quarter or like a half year or so. And I think that maybe going from a CrossFit to Ironman to CrossFit is not that challenging for like any, I would say, athlete. But I think going from an Ironman to CrossFit is not the most likely decision path also. Rather, one would go from an Ironman to a Ultraman or like those more intensive races. But definitely going from CrossFit to Ironman is is something possible. And I would say that I think CrossFit would be done to like maintain both sides. I would say like have a toned body and also do endurance. But in endurance athletes, I think it's only endurance. I mean, lot of endurance athletes, when you see them, or even like the world champions, when you see them, they are very, or even marathon runners. You don't know they're a marathon runner until they actually run. So I think from like a CrossFit athlete or like from a typical weight training person, seeing the physique, the build, you kind of understand that this person does this also.
So Anuj, I have two questions for you. One is in India, what do you think of like the triathlon or Ironman scene? Do you feel like people are participating in stuff like this? There's a growing craze for it. Are there athletes people should look up to or look out for? That's one. And the second thing is, okay, first you answer this question, then I'll ask you the second one because it's a follow up.
When I began training for the Ironman, there weren't too many Ironman athletes also. But I think after seeing me and a couple of more athletes finish after me, because there was a race in Tokyo just after my Norway race, where a lot of Indian athletes ran, and they finished with really good times. So after that, I think the sport of triathlon has drastically, I would not say kind of exploded in the country, but the pace of growth has been exponential. And I think it's been very good in Pune city, because there are a couple of athletes, and there's actually another doctor there in Pune who's finished 25 Ironman so far. So he actually began doing full Ironmans during maybe 2008 9 or so, and in his career he's actually done about 25 Ironman races. And he has a close knit circle of athletes whom he trains, and all of them are aspiring to do an Ironman. Similarly, in India, in Mumbai as well, I'm seeing that I think the main factor is the swim and the bike, where the facility is not ideal also. Running has become a huge craze with the Tata Marathon held every year. But I think even Ironman is something, or even triathlon is something where the youths are not prepared to do triathlon at a young age. It just comes out of your gut, or you feel that you're good at it, so you get into it. But if there were maybe academies to like groom children to get into it, it would help drastically across the country. And other than Pune, even Bangalore is a place where we are seeing that Ironman has, or even triathlon has picked up drastically. And the Ironman community had kept the Ironman in Goa in 2016, 17, 18. But then I think due to lack of participation or extreme heat, they chose to discontinue it. In 2020, they had it, but they cancelled due to the pandemic. So let's hope they have it in 21, because that will attract foreigners to come to India. And how you see foreigners training in Dubai, although Europeans are not physically made to like run in a hot country. But that's when I would say the local athletes have a level playing field with them.
And what I wanted to ask you next is, in terms of money, like, is there good money to be made in this sport? And also in India, because like obviously, like you said, it's a booming sport and it's coming up. Are there sponsors? Are there sponsors willing to back athletes and support them with the training? Because I imagine traveling for such tournaments could be expensive. and people who might not necessarily have the resources, are there sponsors who are willing to back athletes, and is there good money to be made in the sport?
So definitely, I think the swimming and running part are very cost effective. Biking is fairly expensive because mainly of the kind of bike you need to go for. And nowadays there are aero bikes, aero helmets, carbon fiber bikes, trying to be the lightest you can be, and that definitely will will certainly be expensive for like a any I would say as, aspiring athlete to go for. But the good part is that there are a lot of companies sponsoring, and even if not, I haven't heard of any particular companies that are actually getting into sponsorships or so, but a lot of foundations of corporate companies are pushing athletes. So I do know that there is the JSW Foundation, there is a Aditya Birla Foundation, and even Ultratech on their brand name as well. They also sponsor athletes, and they push them to go like for the way forward. And I would say from a I would say surviving financially only on the Ironman would be slightly challenging for a regular Indian compared to the kind of monies that are made in other sports, especially cricket. So there is a huge gap. But I think the more people push, the more people go for it, is when even prize monies will increase. People will be more lured into coming to India for the race, ensuring they do get a good prize money. Even the Tata Marathon, from the prize money they had in 2006 to what they have now, is at least up by I think 17 times more compared to what they had now, then and now. So with the sport getting in, I would say getting picked up by more budding athletes is when we see it will get picked up more and more. And even something different about Ironman in India is that you see people who do it after age 40. That's when you have a good work life balance, you have a family in place, and then you have the time in your hands to do this. But across the world, I would say that the youth are trained to get into this at an early age. They are trained to like go for the Olympic or sprint triathlon, and as they cross 28, 29, they then migrate to the Ironman. So that trend to come to India still has, I would say, a couple of years to go, at least 5 7 years minimum. But when we arrive at that day is when we'll actually see India competing in a global field.
So, Anuj, that was actually going to be the last question that I was going to ask you to wrap up was what are Indian aspirations at the Olympics in the triathlon or all these track and field track events rather. But
Mhm.
I think you just mentioned all of it there. I think that pretty much wraps up this episode. Thank you so much, Anuj, for your time. It gives us a huge sense of pride to have you having finished the Norway Ironman, being the first Indian to do it as well, at that too at a tender age of 1920. You make us proud, and I'm sure whoever's listening in and needs the motivation or wants that motivation to, go get it and try out for these endurance events, do so now. Thanks, Shubham, Rishabh, Gui. Always a pleasure to have you. And we'll be back next week with another new episode. Till then, take care, stay safe. Bye bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Aaron. Thank you
Mazhar,
so much.
Rishabh,
Thanks,
Shubham,
Anuj.
Gui. Had a great
Thanks.
time, and thanks for your time. It's a pleasure of mine as well. Thank you.